Lingua Brutalica is a podcast that uses ethnographic interviews to study language use in the extreme metal community. We are studying a music scene known for its love of themes and topics generally considered offensive, and it is likely that some episodes will touch on topics or opinions some listeners may find tasteless or ethically problematic. Ethnographic researchers aim to adopt the interviewee's point of view so that we can draw out and study the attitudes, beliefs, and practices that are important to them. We want to make it clear that in presenting these conversations here, we do not endorse any of their content. Our aim is to explore the thought processes behind language use in this long-running, international, and yet understudied scene. Hey everyone, welcome back to Lingua Brutalica with me, Jess Benny-Smith, and my co-host Wes Robertson.
Hello.
In this episode, we're talking to John O'Colliver, vocalist and lead guitarist of Australian doom metal project Dr. Colossus. Thanks for being with us, Jono.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. And I should cut you off as well and just explain I'm probably not a lead guitarist. I'm just a humble rhythm guitarist, but
oh really? Okay. Sorry, yeah. I got that wrong.
No, that's fine. For a while I was the only guitarist, but my brother Joel is by well and truly the lead guitarist now.
Okay, great. We'll correct that. Thank you for that.
Former lead guitarist.
Former lead guitarist.
So yeah, just to begin, how would you describe, if someone had never heard of your band at all, how would you describe Dr. Colossus's music? We've seen it described as doom metal, and we use that in the intro, but what were the terms that kind of you would use to introduce it to somebody?
Yeah, I think if you heard what we're doing now, it's hard rock or metal, and then if you kind of define the metal area, it's I guess leans towards stoner rock, which is probably a bit more blues and riffy based, pentatonic riff based, and doom, which is a little bit more, I guess. I'm not sure how much your audience is sort of meddled up, but I guess a little bit more atmospheric sounding, slower sounding, more morose, more less hope. So we touch on that, but generally it's just a hard rock metal kind of band. Okay, great. And how did you first get into metal music, and what attracted you to the style to begin with? That's a great question. I was always a kid that loved scary stuff like Goosebumps books and ancient Egypt and mummies and like anything that was kind of spooky, I would be drawn to on TV. And I think that kind of led me to liking the feeling of like the thrill of something that's a little bit extreme. And I think probably artwork from a lot of like horror shows and horror books went hand in hand with a lot of metal that was all artistically hand drawn, hand painted. And so I think I was probably drawn towards the art of a lot of metal early on. And then I think it would have been Metallica that just really sealed the deal, as a little kid hearing Enter Sandman or something like that, and just sort of linking the imagery of extreme stuff with like the way that extreme music could sound. And then that probably started it all. And then I just tried to get it. I just listened to more and more extreme stuff until you reach the end of extremity.
I wonder if there's like a Goosebumps to metal pipeline. I was a Goosebumps fan when I was a kid. I never thought about any connection there though.
There probably is an R.L. Stine themed band, I'm sure. Yeah.
If not, there should be.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were first getting into stuff like Enter Sandman and eventually, the more extreme, were you paying attention to the lyrics at all?
That's a great question. I don't think I was as much early on. I think when I was that age, it was the lyrics were probably subconsciously important, but it was more about the feeling of the music at the time and the power of it. And even bands like, I guess there was bands like new metal stuff like Korn or Limp Bizkit or something like that, where there was like almost like deliberately offensive lyricism. I found that kind of, I was attuned to that as well, but I don't think that's necessarily why I got into some of those bands. I think it was more the attitude came across, but the lyrics themselves, I wouldn't start picking them apart until these, like the last maybe 5 to 10 years. Now I go back and I listen to that stuff, and I kind of am a lot more aware of the lyrics.
What was the sort of the switch what caused that switch?
I think a big part of it was that I actually started playing bass for Vance Joy, the folk singing guy, Riptide dude, ukulele boy, and he would hate it if I said ukulele boy. But I started like playing live, touring as a touring bassist for him, and I think I just became really attuned to songwriters at that point. So what he was trying to do to craft songs that weren't riff based, that using bare essentials, like just using chords in essence, and how can you have a song that's memorable and classic with just chords? You have to really be careful and selective, or maybe not, maybe you have to be very free with your lyricism, but lyrics have to play a massive role. And I think then I would start listening to more singer-songwriters and going back, and I'd listen to metal with that ear and kind of appreciate a lot of stuff that I'd listened to back in the day and just how outlandish or clever the lyricism was, or I'd come back with quite harsh ears and condemn a lot of either really poorly written or immoral lyrics, or there's a whole world of sexist, misogynist. It's a real kind of He-Man boys club for a lot of the metal hard rock era. And so some of it I condemn it a little bit, going back and listening to it, just being like, this is absolute garbage.
Going back to new metal lyrics is a little harsh, yeah.
Yeah, new metal, particularly new metal.
Yeah.
But I forgive some of it. I think it's a there's a naivety to it, and I'm sure a lot of these people, like even Fred Durst, I think is smarter than a lot of people give him credit for. And I suspect if he given the chance now, he wouldn't write a lot of the things that he wrote back in the day.
So as you became more attentive to metal lyrics, like, was there anything that's like kind of jumped out at you as being, a kind of quintessential representation of metal lyrics in either spirit or quality?
I don't really see metal as genre locked as that. Maybe I guess you can say that there's probably there's no hard and fast rule with any of that. I guess maybe there's like a general undercurrent of the protagonist or the singer-songwriter or the lyric writer representing the other, or and maybe like an antithesis to society, or they're slightly askew of the kind of the norm. And I think that like a lot of metal, I'm even thinking of bands like Fear Factory, where the lyrics were all based on like a metaphor of a mechanized system, and a virus that's attacking the system or kicking back against the system. I guess I'm even like, even Sabbath lyrics are sort of, you can't tell me how to live my life. You can't dictate what I put into my body. I'm going to live free. I'm going to live the way I want to live. There is a slight, I guess, if you had to find commonalities between a lot of the metal lyrics of things that I grew up with, I guess there's a little bit of that. It's like, we're different to the rest of you, and fuck you for that. Or it's like, we're different, and I, as the lyricist, love you as the listener, and you're amazing, and it's an uplifting, optimistic kind of twist on it.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's just a kicking back. The extremity of the sort of style, I guess, lends to the fact that you've got more power to stand alone in being different, I guess.
So within like that kind of broad range, is there a style that you specifically connected with, and has maybe influenced the way that you approach lyrics?
Not particularly with lyrics. I think definitely the delivery of the lyrics, and a lot of the metal that I really latched onto would become, or I would go back and realize, was a lot of just melodic vocals rather than screaming vocals. And I think I would always try and write lyrics that the lyrics that connected to me most were always lyrics that were relatable to some degree, whether that be through humor or through heartbreak or through like a bittersweetness. And I guess I've always just tried to chase that a little bit as well. Like, I think you need to have balance with lyrics. And that goes for metal, or goes for anything really. Like Cannibal Corpse is cool because you can hear a song of basically like an explicit murder from start to finish, and there's no bridge section of a Cannibal Corpse song where there's remorse, or there's there's no kind of other side to that coin. So you need to listen to something else if you want to get another side of the coin.
Sure.
I like the idea that a song itself has both of those sides of the coin. You don't need to go elsewhere to find it. You can be uplifted at the start and feel waves of joy, and then in the middle of it, that is questioned, and maybe it's twisted into guilt, and then at the end the result is something in between the two. Like I think the songs that I attached to the most, and probably went back and played the most, had some element of a balance like that.
You mentioned humor. Do you think, like in the past especially, do you think that humor has been something that metal's been comfortable with, or like were you able to find kind of humor within metal from the start?
It's interesting. Like I wasn't aware. I wasn't thinking about, when we started doing Dr. Colossus, which is Simpsons themed lyrics.
Yeah.
It was just me and my bud Nath who wanted to make songs that were sort of funny to ourselves, and we weren't really aware of, or we hadn't really thought about the lineage of comedy in metal and humorous lyrics in metal in the lead up to that. that's something we kind of we would soon go, there's a massive amount of bands that were never really taking themselves seriously when you think about it. And when you actually are attuned to it, there's tons of bands that took the piss. And there's, I guess, areas of metal themselves that are humorous. Like thrash metal is generally a fairly silly space lyrically. Either loosely themed bands like Municipal Waste that are just in essence a party pizza thrash band, or a lot of thrash in general is tongue in cheek and lighthearted, and I think because people from those shows love to thrash around and the tracks are a bit faster, it lends itself to a humorous kind of approach. But yeah, I definitely started to become more attuned to how many bands had funny lyrics after that. Even serious bands that have funny lyrics.
And have you always kind of adopted this comedic approach that you've described, like when writing your own lyrics? Has that been like the case from the beginning, or is this something just more recent?
Yeah, it's probably just something more recent with Colossus. Early on, so some of the first bands we were in, we would try and write, 3/4 of the record we'd write would be, classic teenage boy, woe is me kind of lyrics, and then maybe one or two of the songs would come out would be more absurd, and there would always be like one or two outliers that would come through that were like, this is a stupid song, but let's put it on. And I think, Colossus is obviously the first time where the project itself is the joke, and then the lyrics are kind of all absurd.
We read an interview with you on how the band came to be, and you mentioned a discussion about trying to find, quote, the heaviest name for the new band, something that was, quote, massive, dumb, heavy, big thing. Did this desire to make sure the band's name kind of feel heavy continue into like your lyric process? Has there always been a desire to make the lyrics feel metal in a way?
No, that's a great call. That's a good idea, though. I should actually try and write a song that takes the formula of heavy lyricism. No, I guess earliest stuff I wrote, I shrouded the lyrics the way that maybe Ozzy Osbourne might shroud the lyrics. So the joke of, I guess the first song we wrote was a song called Mono, which was in essence just a retelling of the monorail episode of from The Simpsons. But everything was a metaphor or shrouded in like a description. It's like rats to slaughter by your tainted song, killing slowly single file. And that's in essence just Lyle Lanley, the silver-tongued salesman, and the townspeople are kind of like rats to the slaughter to him. And so like I think I liked the idea that metal lyrics of that kind of nature made everything sound far more interesting and far more verbose and far more sinister than they really are. So that's in essence all that kind of lyric writing was just a summarized story that already existed on screen, and putting it through this lens of a metaphor of making it sound far more sinister or medieval or deeper and darker than it really is.
So there always has been a bit of a desire to make it have that kind of like metal darkness or feel to the lyrics, or is that something you've moved away from as you've
I think
continued
I've
to develop
moved.
the band?
I think I moved away from it. I think and I think probably in a similar time to when I started to really get into singer songwriters or just classic songs.
Mm-hmm.
Like just I'm obsessed with just listening to classic songs, whether that's even Gold FM on the radio and just like picking apart some garbage from the 80s. It's just now I want to run it through that, trying to write a really great song on its own, and if it happens to sound like metal lyrics, that's great, but I'm not that's not part of the aim anymore for me. I'm purely interested in writing lyrics that somehow connect, lyrics that are open-ended enough for people to sort of attach their own meaning to subconsciously, and then have a balance of real meat and potatoes as well, stuff that people go, yeah, like that's so easy to understand, that's so clear, that's I'll repeat that bit, I will repeat because it's just like a child talking, it's so simple. I'm more obsessed about songwriting now, I think, than the metal, than any perceived metal style.
So it's interesting, the way you've talked about your writing and obviously your performance, because a lot of researchers argue that like metal tends to take a kind of distance from its lyrics, right? So positioning them as just like entertainment, not something to be taken seriously. And obviously Dr. Colossus kind of takes this to another level, right? And so we really wanted to ask you, given that, you do often perform as a character, not necessarily as yourself, do you think that you tend to take a distance from your lyrics? Do you kind of really see yourself aligning with this idea of the lyricist kind of not like being more removed from the lyrics that they're singing and producing?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, with performance. I think that performance of those songs in character, I'm not the character in the songs. So my character is this kind of, and only very loosely, a kind of, I guess, akin to like a cult leader, or if that Stonecutters kind of secret society, slight undertones of religion, slight undertones of sonic stonemasons, and I guess performing those, I feel like I'm a storyteller, and that's the kind of character I take on. But when I'm writing them, I guess I'm actually trying to become the character or put my head into that world directly. And I'm actually trying to do the complete opposite. I'm trying to connect to the human part of the story, or the part that made me, the part that broke my heart when I watched that episode, because I think that the human part and the real part and the gritty part is the bit that connects to people if they listen to it, and you're too removed from it when you're writing, I suspect. Well, for me, everyone's got their own approach. But for me, I think, I need to be there and present and very connected to it at the outset, and then performance, flip it on its head and disconnect then.
This actually leads into kind of the questions we had about the lyrics in specific, because, first and foremost, we just wanted to ask, like, how do you turn Simpsons quotes and stories like into songs? Because you have songs like It's Still Good, which is direct quotes from the show. There's tracks like Get Mendoza that tell a story from the show, the story of McBain. You have songs like Space Coyote or Dr. Tongue, which kind of cover the plot of an episode. And then other songs like Thrill Ho or Hummingbird of Bengal are kind of biographies of characters that go through a lot of different things that they've done. Is there a process in deciding what kind of type of song you're going to make? And how, I guess, do you take all this, hundreds of episodes and distill them into lyrics?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of processes, and Mike, the bass player in the band, he writes, particularly on this new record, he writes lyrics for a lot of the songs that he brings to the table too, or we work on them together. I guess the common thing though is that there'll be a punchline. The punchline is like for Hummingbird of Bengal, the song is like a southern rock sounding track that's like a little bit like Clutch, or a little bit kind of very pickup truck White America sound. And then I loved the idea of using Apu as a character that would sing that song, and not even not attempting to even sound like Apu. So it's Apu's character, in essence, just singing like all American, vet, and so that's the joke from the out. That's the punchline from the outset, and so the rest, the lyric writing then is kind of focused on trying to achieve that goal. So yeah, like West Bengal, born and raised, is just a direct link, a rip of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's opening line. I want you to get out, go to hell, and thank you, come again. They're things that Apu has said, but put in the context of that real kind of American drawl. It changes the feel. So I think that's the same with most of the songs. There's always like a key zone that we're aiming for. And maybe that's like a joke like that, or maybe in the case of like Mendoza or Space Coyote, it's like what sort of song in the metal world would that episode be? If it had to be a musical piece, and in the Space Coyote episode, that's kind of easy for us because there's already a lot of music that's these long winding journey atmospheric builds that sort of goes hand in hand with the Odyssey that Homer goes on. And so it's just a matter of deciding on what that joke is, or what that direction is, and then the lyrics will come from there usually. And it means that you kind of just feel like you're on task. You need to set some sort of limitations, I think, otherwise you can't fit the world into a page.
So there are times that the music comes first, and there's times that the idea comes first. Is that what I'm right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. And then often the spark is I'll actually be watching an episode of The Simpsons, and one of the lines will actually jump out. Like I'll hear the line on the screen, and I'll start to sing it before anything else. Like I'll watch an episode, I'll go and get in the car and go for a drive somewhere, and I'll be putting a melody. I will put a melody to a line that was in the show. I'll sing it, and then that's sort of the beginning of whatever the line happens to be will inform the next thing I do. But yeah, that's generally what I'll do. That's how I write songs. If I hear a phrase, someone says a phrase, or I have one line of lyric that's written with no melody, I'll sing it. Like I'm just looking here. I don't know if I can flip my camera. there's this box here
Mm.
that says congratulations on your new addition.
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever, something like that will jump out to me, and I'll just have that line run around my head for the next 2 hours, and I'll just sing some melodies onto it, and you'd be really surprised, like how after a while it sounds like you intended it to be.
So based on that, is there like a set of kind of criteria in your mind for like, what makes for an appropriate line to be the inspiration for a given song?
Not really. I guess we steer away a little bit from, I guess there's an idea of what The Simpsons is like if you aren't a huge Simpsons fan. And
Mm-hmm.
you probably know a few lines from The Simpsons if you're not a Simpsons fan. Like, I think we steer away from like super obvious stuff as much as possible. Like although in saying that, we don't have a song that's got like Cowabunga Man as a chorus, or like Don't Have a Cow Man, or like any of these kind of, I guess, very, very mainstream quotes that are filtered through to everyone. And I think that where we're trying to hit with a lot of them is we imagine that our audience has watched a lot of it, and they will hear something that they remember, and they will be amazed that it made it into the track, but they will feel even more attached to it because it's quite niche and it's something that they remember and they loved it. So I think there's not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but yeah, we try and keep it a little bit. There's a few like abstract, weird references in there that if people get them, it's kind of like, hopefully they're stoked on it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of someone who's not like a big Simpsons fan, I'm like, my husband and brother-in-law always rip on me for not having adequate Simpsons knowledge. I did find, like, when I was looking through the lyrics, though, that there were a lot of things that kind of like jogged memories in my mind, like, kind of brought it back from like when I was a child, like sitting at home watching Simpsons and stuff like that. So I think it still has like, that effect, even if you're not like a huge Simpsons fan. Things kind of like come back to you when you kind of see them written on the page. Like
that. That's nice. I like that. That's awesome.
How do you like cull the massive amount of information though, like into a song? For instance, you have the song "Sex Cauldron," which is sort of a biography of Krusty the Clown, focused around kind of the theme is the quote from Maude Simpson that Krusty rips off of in an episode. But how do you like turn that into the center of a song about Krusty, and then how do you take all the kind of Krusty lore from decades and chop it down into what fits into a song like that?
Well, again, this is a song that Mike brought to the table, and he brought a lot of the lyric kind of direction to the table. But he probably took a similar approach to me when I was working on it too. The point of the song is that Krusty is pathetic and has ruined his life because of just overindulgence, morally corrupt lifestyle. And the sex cauldron is this imaginary or non-imaginary venue of folklore that perhaps he like wasted his life away at. We're sort of never really told about any details of the sex cauldron in the show. It's just a sort of reference that seems to spark Krusty into some kind of, I thought they shut that place down. Like it's obviously some place that he's spent some time. So I think we just had the common goal in that, and it's unspoken. We don't really sit down and go, okay, we have a goal here. But I think the common goal is probably that, the lyrics and the story needs to really just reflect Krusty's downfall. And so the chronicalization of the verses is then just a list of the sort of the downfall.
Mm-hmm.
It's blowing all his money and buying basketball teams, and just like that's the thing we want to get across with that song. So that helps us to cut out things that, there's lots of stuff that happens to Krusty, and some of it fits into that world. Some of it paints him as a real piece of work. So let's grab that. And then of those 30 things that fit into that world, only 10 sound great when you put them in a verse and fit the sort of syllable structure of because that song's, everything's on the one. It's like, disappointment to my name, Hyman's a broken man. Like everything's on the ones. So if it'll fit the theme, then it fits the song as well, then it's in. And we might just do some shuffling once the general structure's there.
So how about, when you move from the opposite direction? Like, so we're thinking about, songs like Dr. Colossus, where, you have a character that only really appears in one episode, being featured in a whole song. How do you kind of build a song around, a character or an idea that doesn't necessarily have as much material attached to it?
I fill it with feelings. So, and it's probably a good technique to use in general. If you have limited details, then you put yourself in the gaps. And so I think in that song, I can't recall off the top of my head without having it in front of me necessarily. But I would just, with the limited details we have about Dr. Colossus, we can assume things. We'd assume he's pretty lonely, and he's a divorcee. He's obviously had his run-ins with the law, and so you extrapolate out that he's a heartbroken supervillain that has lots of regrets and is not a he's not a Marvel character. So I think it's just filling the gaps in and then exploring maybe. So we're exploring misery, which is never really sort of explicitly said in the show that he's a miserable guy. It's like barely anything's really shown of him. He's obviously a bit of his name sounds very like sinister, but himself doesn't seem very sinister at all. So I just fill the gaps, I suppose.
What about while you're doing that, we noticed that as you kind of approach the lyrics, you use a lot of rhyme in the way that you tell the stories. Like in the song Thrill Ho, you have blue-haired boy, Nelson's wedgie toy, Luann's shining star, my dad sleeps in a race car. The song Pick a Bar, slowly melting in my car, what the hell is Pick a Bar? Is rhyme something you feel kind of important to your lyric writing?
For Pick a Bar, that definitely, but that's based on the episode itself. I think because that word when Homer's trying to remember to pick up Bart, and there's all these repeated signs in his life that should trigger his memory to go and pick up Bart, he still doesn't get it. And I think something about that repetition made me link and rhyme everything through that song. Like even in that track, in that episode, they the kids are talking about going and seeing Bart and Fink, and it's like this kind of like it's such a movie that kids just wouldn't be excited to go and see at all, but they chant Bart and Fink like it's some cool it's like they're going to see Terminator or something, or like, and they're like, even just the repetition of that section where they're just like, Barton Fig, Barton Fig. It's like, why? The fact that they repeat that line stood out to me as well. So I think any of those lines, anything where there's repetition, I kind of just naturally, that triggers rhyme for me. It's like hammering a point and like laboring something that you get it in like the first one or two lines that this thing rhymes, but it's going to keep going. With Thrill Ho, again, that's a track Mike brought to the table, so I won't speak for him, but I think that was just the way that we wrote those lyrics in a very traditional kind of poem layout. So it was almost like a limerick in the way that the rhyme would always come back and hit at the end. It wasn't something conscious, but I think I always lean in towards a rhyme, just in general. Outside of this band, in all bands, I'm a bit of a sucker for the rhyme. I like a nice wrap up at the end of a verse, and then I feel like when you break away from it, there's usually a point to that. So if you don't rhyme a word, it stands out more. If the majority of the rest of it's kind of got a rhyme to it. I like the rules of the rhyme. I like the limitations of the rhyme.
And we also noticed that there are a few cases where you do use swear words in your lyrics, not many, and most of them admit a goddamn, which I don't know if we'd necessarily consider that to be a swear word in the strictest of senses. And I think there's one occasion where you say like any shit out of luck. So we think that these aren't direct quotes, if we're not mistaken. Let us know if we are. But is this something that you've intentionally added? And is there effect that you're looking to generate with this addition?
That's a good question. No, I think we're not hiding away from the fact that our voice is different to the show's voice. And it's probably the way we would, retell something like is shit out of luck. That's just a phrase we would use. And so we probably, I guess we're talking to an audience that's similar to ourselves, and we're not talking to children necessarily. So there's no conscious reason for that. I think it's just the way that we retell, and that's our vernacular. The goddamn, I think, might be more of a piss take on an Americanism.
Yeah,
and maybe shit out of luck is too, in the way that like when we as members of the band would converse, a lot of Australians would use a lot of Americanisms to maybe dramatize something they say. I think that's probably about the extent of it. I generally like the fact that we don't swear that much. Not because I think it needs to be clean or appeal to more people or anything like that. I think it's just there's an innocence to The Simpsons, which I think is kind of nice to keep intact.
So do you think that would be challenged if you were to use like what are generally considered to be like more extreme swear words like fuck or something?
Yeah, I think it would be very funny, but I think it would be short-lived. I think that like I do like that gag. I do like that. I do really like the idea of writing an extremely explicit song based on The Simpsons, but I just don't think it would have longevity for us. It's like there's no emotion in there. I think the themes and the things that keep you coming back to songs, or the things that make you want to write them, is based on human condition at some point, and the jokes come from there as well. So the swearing thing would be funny though. but I think that's more like for a grindcore band.
Mhm.
That's like a 1 minute, like, a real quick punchline where you're just in and out. But maybe not for Dr. Colossus.
Okay. I mean, in general, though, speaking of like adding things, and do you feel you have a bit of freedom to play? Because like I don't mean to say like, hey, this is a mistake or something, but we did notice that there are some like quotes that you've made slight changes to. One of the most obvious.
They're probably mistakes.
Oh, okay. Well, if it is, yeah, we could like. The one I was curious about is the song "It's Still Good."
Yeah.
You have the only lyrics in the song are "It's just a little dirty, it's just a little greasy, it's just a little airborne, it's still good," which I didn't remember what that was from. So I looked it up, and it's the episode where Lisa pushes Homer's barbecued pig down the street, and he's chasing it and trying to say it's still edible. And in the episode, it wasn't just a little greasy; it was just a little slimy. And I was wondering, was that an intentional change, or was that just like a mistaken remembrance, or what? Yeah, like do you feel that you can mess with the lyrics a bit as you need to?
No, that was pure. That's just It was one of those ones that I didn't go back and rewatch, and
Okay.
and my memory had in my mind it was always greasy, and
Mhm.
I wrote those lyrics, and like a series of Swiss cheese holes all lining up. No one mentioned it, and it was only when I kind of, at one point, someone on YouTube had lined all the tracks up with episodes or something at one point, and I was like, I don't think he even says greasy there. So that's just me. That's just the way I remembered that lyric, that quote. Complete misfire. Yeah, it happens a little bit. There's some inconsistencies throughout, and some of them, most of them are just, they're like decisions we have to make to keep the line lyrical, or keep it working in a song. But there's like that one you've just picked up then is just pure. Just we didn't go back and fact check or get the line right. We just stuffed it up.
I mean, based on that, then how important is it to fact check or have the quotes be totally accurate?
Well, probably super important. I reckon that if I look at this with my editorial brain, I would be like, someone should have got fired for that blunder. But I think in the context of the band, it doesn't really matter. The fact that you noticed it and talked about it is cool. That's great. Anyone talking about or questioning something in the lyrics is good as far as I'm concerned, and it just shows that they've listened to it and they've spotted some kind of bit that jumped out. So I don't care about that. That's good. But I think the joke of this band, the integrity of the fact that it needs to really, if it's based on this world, it needs to be hitting its straps, and it needs to be accurate. We should have checked that, and we should for the sake of the overall gag, accuracy should be important.
So do you get that a lot, like people coming up to you and saying like, oh, I noticed like this is from this episode, or like, oh, I thought this is like a bit of a deviation from like the original quote, or like, those kind of comments?
No, not so much. The only other one I've encountered was, I think, in Stupid Sexy Flanders, I think I dubbed him as a Catholic. I don't think he's a Catholic.
No, they're all Protestants, right? I think.
Protestant. Yeah. So live, I changed the word Catholic to Christian. I just sort of went back out. There's a couple of things like that have been brought up to us. Like someone will someone, and it's usually a close friend. Like, there's probably people that pick up on it and just don't ever mention it. But then we've got a few close friends that are real Simpsons nerds, and we love them. And I think they feel like, I found something that you stuffed up. So it's fun. That's good. It's like you need to be held accountable for that. If you're already gonna rip on something that exists, you need to rip on it right.
Like, to talk about like ripping on things and gags in general, we kind of want to detour a little bit just to talk about humor and metal a bit and how that's done, because it's hard to express by an interview but your lyrics are incredibly funny. Like, listening to the songs, I actually just had some friends over and I was playing your guys' lyrics while we did some games and stuff. And one of them was just like cracking up, like just in the corner, the one that I guess knew the Simpsons most, just the little things that were there. And I'm wondering, how do you kind of make something that will be funny? Like, there aren't like straightforward jokes in the sense of some, like there's metal gag bands that make like jokes and the kind of punchline things, but yours have these more kind of like Easter eggs and references. We talked about Pick a Bar. One that stuck out for me is the chorus of "Ah, the Miracle Mile." When I first heard that, I did not remember the episode at all, and it felt like it came off like with a sense of longing and nostalgia. And then when I found the context was Homer driving through like a strip mall and looking at light up restaurant signs, the humor of it just like hit really hard. Is this kind of framing something that you spend time on? Like, do you want to is there a bit of effort that you kind of want the audience to have to get the jokes? Is that kind of a goal you have when you frame them?
I don't think you can craft that deliberately. Like, I think that you have to just try stuff out, and when you put it in the context. So like that line was, again, that's a weird one. Like, Lard Lad, Joel wrote the music entirely, basically wrote the whole song musically first. And he said, I've got the idea that this song would be based around the Lard Lad donut guy. And because he doesn't write the lyrics, and he's got a very basic kind of grasp of the Simpsons world. His world's music and shredding and guitar. And so for whatever reason, when he wrote that song, he had that. He's like, I think of this like the Lard Lad, Iron Man, kind of giant Iron Man coming to life. So there's like Sabbath's Iron Man that has kind of that kind of idea as well in the metal world. So I literally just watched that episode a ton of times, and just when that line came up, to me, the way Homer phrases it sounds like lyrics already. Like, I think it's just the way where he pauses, like it's like a pre-written lyric, and maybe it's referencing something else that I never picked up. He might be referencing there might be, because often Simpsons will do that. They'll be referencing a quote from someone else, but for whatever reason, that lyric just stood out, and I just forced it in to the chorus, and it happened to work well. Like, I thought it fit really well, and it ticked the box for me of like an emotive sounding lyric. It begins with an I'm not sure what you call those, like an
Yeah.
It began with that. That's like an emotional kind of call to arms in a way. We couldn't plan it. It's just like we just kept taking the steps towards what the goal was a little bit, and along the way you find those sort of nuggets, and you kind of grab them when you can get them. You just grab them and plop them in, and that's where the joy is of songwriting. I think for us finding those little bits that work feels like you've leveled up in a game of Tetris or something.
Yeah, because I had honestly a bit of an emotional response to like the way that the line is done with that awe and then just kind of the miracle mile sounded so poetic, and I felt like a fool when I realized where it came from, and that kind of made it even funnier to me in a way.
That's good. That's nice. Yeah, that's just purely that those. I guess that's just the hemispheres of I'm trying to write melodies that are kind of classic, that hit no matter what the lyric is, and then and I'm not doing that with any sense of humor in my heart at all. I'm doing that purely as like, what is the best chorus I can write here, and then when that's done, if you've done it earnestly, and if I feel like if I worked on it earnestly and with the humor aside, then the humor is in the fact that the lyric is just shouldn't be there. Like it's just a total. Yeah, it's just a total juxtaposition.
Well, now that you've said that, that's actually something that like we found really interesting and even impressive about your lyrics is how the songs are often phrased or framed in a way that feels, as vague as it sounds, like, quite poetic, as you've said, but also, quite recognizably metal, even if that's not your intention. And, some of them read like they're even, commenting on something or expressing, the singer's feelings. And I think maybe the most obvious example of this is the fact that, the songs are comedic, as we've just discussed, and yet do often have quite a very dark tone a lot of the time. And I think, this kind of makes sense in the context of The Simpsons, because The Simpsons is known for being, sometimes quite dark in its messaging, but, being often kind of veiled by the show's generally kind of light and innocent spirit, as you mentioned earlier. But it seems to me like even just when I'm reading the lyrics that a lot of your songs do kind of seem more straightforwardly dark, even if they are comedic. And this comes through in songs that you mentioned earlier, like Mono, that begins with that line, rats to slaughter by your tainted song. Were you actually trying to like highlight the darkness of The Simpsons in writing these lyrics, even if you weren't trying to make the lyrics sound metal in any way?
Yeah, definitely early on, because I thought that was kind of part of the joke world. Like that is a good joke to do. So yeah, and again, I think in those early, that was the first song we wrote. The second song I wrote was the one about Ralph's unrequited love for Lisa, and I called it "Son of a Pig," which is just sort of like, trying to be like as absurdly hateful towards the police as possible. Like something like at the time I was probably like, oh, that's what a sort of hardcore band would do. Or so I think early on, yeah, that adding darkness to it was like a deliberate tact, but it wasn't. It wasn't the way it always ran after that. I think there was a bit more of a lightheartedness as we went on with this band that came through.
What about like songs like Thrill Ho? Because that's about Millhouse, which I guess is kind of inherently depressing. And you have the line that I love on that is the chorus, "Nothing's coming up me," which is nothing coming up Millhouse like inversion.
Yeah.
Like was that a time that was that in the period you were trying to move away from the darkness, or did that just kind of like happen to be dark because it's about Millhouse and he's like inherently kind of a pathetic character?
So I think you've made me realize where the humor line switched, and it was when Mike, our bass player, joined the band. That line was one of Mike's. So it was, I think he has a little bit more of a lighthearted and silly side when it comes to writing lyrics, which just came in and brought a different voice into the sort of style of the lyricism. Pre his involvement in the band, I think that's when the lyrics were more shrouded in sinister and shrouded in like evil. So yeah, I think there's probably his influence there as well, and that being his own lyrics that he brings in, and own lyric ideas, and also like allowing me to feel like I can, contribute those sort of lyrics and it will still work as well.
Did you feel any pressure that like metal kind of has to, if metal's going to be funny, it has to be dark? Like, have you had encountered people just being against the idea of humor and metal in general?
Sure. There'll be like a few people, I'm sure. I think generally no. I don't think it matters. And I mean, definitely not for us. Like we listen to a lot of heavy stuff that the lyrics are, stupid, but the bands are like great. Like the Melvins are like renowned for dumb lyrics, or absurd, silly, childish lyrics. I don't think it really matters to us, but I think there's probably quite a few people that we would want to go and play festivals with or be booked by that wouldn't know where to throw us. The general path of a metal band would be to start live shows, start doing some small live headlines, maybe get some international support slots with different bands, get a booking agent to kind of pit you with bands of a similar world. And for whatever reason, those seem to be hard for us to get. I think it's partly A, we suck, but B, it's just that like we're not a comedy band, and so you wouldn't put us into a lineup of a bunch of funny bands,
right?
But we're not like a typical metal band either. So when you've got a lineup of a bunch of atmospheric doom bands, we don't fit into that realm. We're not like traditionally like a desert stoner rock band, though we generally would go all right on that sort of a lineup. So I think there's like probably it's more just confusion from people that if they don't know the band, they're kind of just like I don't know what to do with them in the industry. And so you end up just waiting for a band like when Oakley Dokley ended up coming out and touring. Who the hell else is going to support those guys? It's like so a very specific. You find yourself really pushing back from being put into specific spots.
Sure.
Which we try and just do as much as we can with as many people as possible to keep everything as broad as we can.
Well, seeing as obviously, that much of your lyrical content does focus on The Simpsons, it is interesting though to observe how, some of your lyrics do kind of branch out from that world. Given that there's, songs like Lard Lad, where you have lines like greed beckons greed, or that's what you welcome when you trust advertising, which don't appear to be from The Simpsons, if I'm not mistaken, although they do make sense given the song's focus on the episode where Springfield's advertising mascots come to life. Is this just extra framing, or have you actually tried to kind of, step outside of The Simpsons world and integrate things like social critique into the music that you've developed with the band?
Yeah, I think a bit of both of that. I think, if maybe stepping into that world and then working out the parts of that episode that resonate with me.
Right.
As
on a personal level?
On a personal level. As a kid, the parts of that episode that resonated with me would have been, Bart on the shoulders of the evil Satan breaking the school down.
Sure.
And nowadays when I watch it, I'm like, it's a commentary on the power that commerce and advertising and brands have over people when they empower them with their attention. That's very interesting. That resonates with me a lot. And so I naturally just lean into that area of the episode, and I extrapolate a little bit of, I like the idea of having that song kind of, because it finishes on a verse. It's like a final verse, and to me that's kind of like a summary or a wrap up, or where a moral of the story would go. And so you have to bring new words into that world to sort of, the audience summarizes that episode themselves, really. We're left to come up to that conclusion. We don't have Lisa necessarily coming in at the end of the episode saying, well, we all learned something today, which they often do. That's left to us. So in the final verse, I think I like the idea of summarizing it and being like, you reap what you sow. And if you want to, and that's a metal thing to do as well, I think. Like, there's a lot of pseudo environmentalism in metal, and there's a lot of watch what you do and you'll reap what you sow, and apocalyptic warnings foreshadowing human behavior and how you're going to meet your own demise. So I think it was probably unconsciously a little bit of that.
Another interesting one is Hummingbird of Bengal, because it's the only time where you actually talk about The Simpsons itself as a show. Yeah. In the lyrics, say what you like about stereotypes, more upstanding than all of my peers. Though strictly Hindu and voiced by a white dude, the boundaries just really ain't clear. Is this kind of an extension of these ideas, or was like there is any hesitation in writing lyrics that broke down the fourth wall in this way? Because I think it's the first time you've done that in one of your songs.
Well, it was again, it was like taking one step after the other. I liked the idea of using Apu as the character in this song because it was already a sort of juxtaposition on cultural norm. And because I wasn't going to be voicing Apu, then we already sort of have him in this Americanized background. We've shifted his kind of character into another culture. And I thought that I think that it's really important to, it would be really lazy to not address the fact that you're already playing in this world where you're commenting on culture, and if you don't, I guess, address that directly, your audience might not quite realize whether you're taking the piss, what your intention is. And I think I really wanted to make it clear that our intention was that of analysis and not of a sort of appropriation or a cheap kind of, like there was idea we threw around ideas of when you're working with any different cultural reference musically. Get Mendoza, for example. There's a sort of Middle Eastern or a kind of I'm not sure what the instrument is, but there's a sort of a Middle Eastern undertone to the
sitar. Is that?
Yeah, it's not a sitar, but it's like a similar kind of sound. It actually just might be a guitar, but it's affected to sound like that. And even like there's a South American kind of pan flute at the start of Space Coyote. I mean, I think it's really, we labored over those sort of decisions as to whether or not we were parodying a culturally recognizable sound, which we didn't want to be doing? Did it help the world that we were trying to build with the song? Mm-hmm. Was it evocative of foreign? Was it evocative of did that make that foreign thing seem evil or sinister? And so, yeah, it's something we're aware of, and I think it's just like by the fact that we're 4 white guys that grew up in Victoria, we know our knowledge is limited of a lot of cultural specificities. And so I think Apu is almost like a comment on that there's no cut and dry with Apu's voice actor being a white American guy. I think it's silly to just, after that debate came out about Hank Azaria playing Apu's character, I think it's like immoral to just carry on as normal without putting in some questions and moving forward from this point after that conversation has happened. I think it would just be a wasted song if it was just, here's Apu, here's what he does, he's chilling. Like the cultural significance of that conversation surrounding Apu's voice actor was the most interesting part of Apu's kind of place, because it brings into question, when you go back and watch a lot of those episodes, now I go back and watch them and it makes me question a lot of the decisions they make about Apu's character. Mm-hmm. And the insight we get to his family and people of color in general in the show. Mm. So I think it was our way of just sort of, for me, it was just a way of being like, we are we're breaking the fourth wall here. We're acknowledging that this is the cultural discussion that needs to happen around Apu, and it would be remiss to not mention the fact that he's voiced by a white dude, and it's a sort of very unclear moral ground of is that right? And maybe the song is tone deaf in a little bit in that respect as well, but hopefully not.
This discussion of kind of culture and has got me thinking about something that I didn't actually plan to ask, but it's something that's kind of been on my mind as I've been listening to your music and actually talking about you with a number of like Aussie friends who are all like, the minute I say Simpsons themed, like before I even say metal band, they get excited. Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, you've answered questions about like why Simpsons in the past, but why do you think there's such a strong cultural connection in Australia to The Simpsons, especially as an American show, as an imported show, talking about that? Why do you think The Simpsons is such an important source of like meaning and memory and joy and like you've just done now, reflection for so many Australians?
Probably for the same reason that it is with Americans. But then, and that's like the fundamental kind of building blocks of this show, I guess, is that it's based around a family, a kind of nuclear family in a way of like a bunch of characters it's character based. So everyone knows someone that's similar or is someone similar. And everyone's flawed, which we love as audience. We love to see flaws, and then we like to see redemption of those flaws. So Homer's character is, in essence, constantly vulnerable to his flaws, and then he redeems himself. and we kind of always go on that journey with him. So I think on a base level, universally, and at least universally in the Western world, it has the formula there that we will attach to it. And then I think it was a matter of the timing of the actual broadcast of the show. It was on like peak times when we were growing up and we were around our families and we were at home and we were associating it subconsciously with protection and warmth, and it was an escapism from that as well. It was a little bit naughty, and it was a little bit I had friends that weren't allowed to watch it.
Same.
There was like a good combination of all of those things. It was like a warm, nice place where you could go and you associate it with you growing up. And I think the hardcore kind of Simpsons meme community that exists today are probably people that, in a very similar way, grew up and are nostalgic of that time. And the show was at its absolute best, as it developed from there. By the time we were starting to understand good jokes, good comedy, good writing, the show was like hitting its straps around season 4 and 5 and 6. It's just like rapid fire, intelligent jokes, jokes you've got to work for a little bit. Nothing's just given to you on a plate. It's just the best of the best writers, comedy writers, working on a show that already had this sort of incredible foundation of connection with people.
So to kind of wrap up this whole line of thinking then, ultimately, what would you say is the role of, your lyrics and language use in the lyrics more generally within Dr. Colossus's music?
I would say where we play the role of a curator. We curate content that we think, when put into a particular song or a particular frame, we can bring something new to the tale of that, whether that be culturally and society based from a sort of broad level, or emotional, personal, and kind of individual, resonating with particular parts of songs. To create new connections through those juxtapositions. How's that?
Great. Beautiful way to end. I think that's a fantastic ending line. Amazing.
I don't think I'd ever say that. I don't think I'd ever summarize something like that in, like, if it was a metal injection interview or something like that.
Well, we try to create a space for different kinds of answers. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it on record now.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much for taking your time to speak with us. You've just released your latest album pretty recently. Is there anything that's coming up, though, that people that are fans should look out for?
We're going to do a launch, obviously, for the album came out last year, but we had to postpone all of our launch shows. So this year we'll hopefully be able to slot in some more touring of the record and go and play it live. And when I've got COVID, so when I recover from having this thing, I will be training my voice back up and getting strong.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Well, sorry to hear that.
Well, yeah, it's okay. It was inevitable, unfortunately.
Well, thank you, especially for making the time given the circumstances. We really appreciate you talking to us. Glad you still have your voice. I've heard some people don't. So
I don't have my taste or smell.
Oh, geez.
Oh, that's also pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll see. Hopefully, it comes back soon.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you get on the mend soon. But thanks for chatting. Still, it was really interesting. Glad we got to talk to you.
Yeah, and sorry, just lastly, where should people go if they want to check out more of your projects?
drcolossustheband.com is a good spot. And then in terms of my other projects, I've got another character called Casino Stepdad that I haven't put out any releases with yet, but that's something that you can go and check out as well. He's like a sort of 50-something-year-old outer suburb guy that used to play in a few bands, and he's getting back into the music scene now with his keyboard. So you can go and check that out too.
Right on.
Yeah, well, we'll put those links in the description as always. And
Very good.
That should be it from us. So yeah, thanks for sticking around.
Yeah.
Thanks for your questions. It's nice to hear that you've sort of listened pretty intently to some of those lyrics and made me think about them. So that's good. Take care of yourselves.
Cool. You too, man. Hope you recover soon.
Yeah.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Lingua Italica. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you stay tuned for our next episode. Before we leave, we just wanted to acknowledge that this podcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.